everyone, and welcome to my first reading vlog of 2021. This reading vlog is for the Buzzword Readathon, sometimes also called BuzzwordAthon, not 100% sure of the official title, but this readathon was created by Kayla, aka Books and Lala, and this year it's actually happening every single month from the 1st to the 7th, and each month there's a different buzzword or like buzzword theme. So this month the buzzword theme is colors, so you have to read books that have colors in the title. So it is day one of the Buzzword Readathon, and it's actually towards the end of the day, so I've already completed one whole book. I really meant to vlog earlier, but I only ended up getting in like little montage-y clips, which depending on how long this readathon turns out, all of the montage-y bits of my video might be cut out because just nobody needs like an hour-long reading vlog video from me right now. So the first book that I ended up completing for the week is Across the Green Grass Fields by Seanan McGuire. This obviously has green in the title, and this is the, I want to say, the 6th book in the Wayward Children series. So if you're not familiar with this series, it is basically about, the first book is called Every Heart a Doorway, and it's about this home for children that have gone through portals into other worlds. So places like Wonderland and Narnia, and then they've come back from those worlds and they have a hard time fitting back into just Earth, and so they go to this home for wayward children where they can either just cope with the fact that they probably won't make it back to this other world, or they can go there to just wait until hopefully a portal will open for them again to be able to make it back to that world, because usually the other worlds that they go to are the places where they feel like they really belong, and so it's not a good time when they have to come back to planet Earth, which I think is how we all feel right now. But yeah, this is the 6th book in the series, and when I started this book I actually didn't know what I was reading about, because the way these books are set up is like, for instance, let's say the first one is set in the present, every other book will follow that timeline, and then every other book will be kind of like a prequel or an origin story to some of the other characters that we follow, and we'll get to see them like go through their portal for the first time. So I wasn't sure whether this was going to be a present day book or one of the origin story books. I started reading it. It's about a girl called Reagan, and I thought, this doesn't sound familiar at all. So then I actually opened and read the inside flap, and it actually says a standalone wayward children's story containing all new characters and a great jumping on point for new readers. So I realized that the reason I didn't recognize her was because this is a brand new character book. So we are following our main character called Reagan, and for the majority of this book she is 10 years old, and when she turns 10 she notices that a lot of the other girls at her school are going through puberty and their bodies are changing and hers isn't. So she brings this up to her parents, and her parents tell her that the reason that's happening is because she's actually was born intersex, and not really knowing how to process that information, she ends up confiding in one of her other 10-year-old friends called Laurel, and Laurel has a very cookie cutter kind of perspective of what like real girl is. So for instance, there's a scene at the very beginning of this book where they're in kindergarten and they had this other friend that was called Heather, and Heather brings a snake to school, and Laurel freaks out and basically shuns Heather from their friend group because she doesn't think that a snake fits into what her idea of being a girl is. So when Laurel hears this about Reagan, she completely freaks out and calls her a boy and just a bunch of horrible things, and Reagan gets really upset, runs into the woods, and that is when she runs through her portal into her world, which is called the Hooflands, which is just full of creatures that have hooves, like centaurs and minotaurs and unicorns and things like that. So that is essentially the synopsis of this book. I did finish it all in one day. It is only about 170 pages, so it's not quite as impressive as it seems, and I feel like the words are like really big. This is a lot more middle grade-esque than I remember it being, even though it's like recommended for young adult, it's marketed as young adult books, but this one just felt very middle grade, which could also just be because we were following a 10-year-old girl for the majority of it. So with these books, this video was already so long, but here I'm going to tell you my opinion on this book. With all of the Wayward Children books, they're all very hit or miss. Like the first book in the series, I absolutely loved. The second book, did not like at all. The third book, I thought it fell in the middle. The fourth book, I really liked again. The fifth book, I didn't really like at all. And then this book, I I think I'm going to land on about a 2-star rating for this book. At first, I almost just threw up. At first, I did really like it because I thought this whole idea of reading from the perspective of a character that is intersex, because that is not something I've ever read from before, and also, I'm gonna be honest, it was not something that ever really crossed my mind, like how kind of confusing that must be to like grow up just thinking you're kind of like the same as everybody else, which you are, but then having your parents tell that to you and just like how you would kind of process that information is not something I ever thought about before. So I thought it was really great that we got that kind of representation in here, but also that it was gonna hopefully be discussed in this book. But unfortunately, even though like her parents telling her that she's intersex and then her talking to her friend about it and the friend freaking out, it was kind of like that was the sort of inciting incident in the book. But as soon as that's over and she gets to her other world, that whole storyline is like never mentioned again. It's like briefly mentioned in passing because not to like spoil you, it's not really a spoiler, but she ends up being in this other world for years and years and years and growing up there, and it's just briefly mentioned in passing that like she has accepted the fact that she is intersex because in this world she's the only human there, so she's never gonna fit in, and so like then she becomes okay with the fact that like it's just, I don't know. I just don't know that that topic was handled well because it was such a big part of the beginning of the story, and it's like that is what triggered the rest of the story. So the fact that we never looped back to that, at least at the end or something, it just kind of felt like it wasn't used properly, or that it felt like it was used and it wasn't used in a way where it was like we just had a character that was intersex. It was like it became a part of the story, but then we never got a finished part of that story. Does that make sense? Maybe not. But I just don't know that the way that the intersex rep in here was handled particularly helpfully. But then again, I don't have any personal experience with it, so maybe I shouldn't have an opinion on it. I don't know. But that's how I felt about this book. Also, I wasn't overly impressed with anything in this book. Like, I didn't super love the characters. And something I struggle with a lot with these books are the world building of the magical worlds that they go to. Because in the first book, which is my favorite, it all takes place here. So there is no magical portal jumping world stuff happening, but in any of the other books they do go through portals to other worlds, and I feel like we always get like the bare bones of world building. There's never any atmosphere with these worlds, and they just always tend to feel really flat, and that is how I felt with the world in this book. So overall, this book just kind of lost me. The only reason I gave it 2 stars was because there was a twist at the end that I actually didn't see coming and I thought was really cool. But then, because this book is so short, the ending, it was just like, here's the twist, here's the end, it's done. And it's one of those things where I was like, I wish this book was like 100 pages longer so that we could have really explored that particular part of the story, as well as all the other parts of the story that I felt like were not fully wrapped up or concluded, or I didn't feel like I had closure with those parts of the story. So yeah, that was an unfortunate start to the week, but we still have 1 book down and 6 more days to go. So the next book that I'm going to be picking up, somehow I lost it already. Here it is. The next book I'm going to be picking up is called Darling Rose Gold. It took me ages to realize that this book had a color in the title. When I was going through my Goodreads, I was like, I don't have any books on here with colors in the title. And then finally it's like, it clicked in my brain that rose gold, or just gold, is a color. So this book is a doozy of a story. So I'm actually going to wait until I like start the book, and then I will tell you what the synopsis is. Plus I feel like we've already talked so much and I'm starting to lose my voice. So that's all for tonight, and I will update you another time. Alright, so it is now day 4 of the Buzzword Readathon. Sorry if I'm looking a little disheveled, not really sure what's going on with all of this hanging out the back of my head, but I don't know why I didn't film for 2 days. I'll tell you one thing, I didn't read at all yesterday, but I am on page 136 of Darling Rose Gold, and wow, this is quite a story, so hopefully I will do it justice when I explain it to you. I think I might do a whole review video on this, because even though I'm not even halfway through it, I already feel like I have a lot of stuff to say. So in this book, we're following 2 characters, a mother and a daughter. The daughter is called Rose Gold Watts, and for the first 18 years of her life, she was living in and out of hospitals. She was in a wheelchair, she had a feeding tube. Supposedly she had all of these horrible illnesses, but no matter how many doctors she saw or procedures that they performed, they were never able to really figure out what was wrong with her. Turns out her mother, Patty Watts, was actually just a really good liar, and she completely made up the whole story and had all of these horrible things happen to Rose Gold that didn't need to happen. So she went to jail for 5 years. When she comes out of jail, everybody is really surprised to find Rose Gold on the other side of the gate waiting to pick her up and let her live with her and her brand new baby in their house. So this book is already quite a story, as you can tell. If it sounds a little familiar, you're probably thinking of the true story of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard, which had a similar sort of story. I do think that this was very heavily inspired by the actual story, because there's even like some very specific details about the real story that are incorporated with these characters too, which I'll talk more about it later, because just in case this book does strongly follow the same plot of the real story, I don't want to like say it and then totally spoil the book for anybody else who reads it. So when it's finished, I'll give you a little bit of details about how this relates to the real story. But for some reason, I had some preconceived notions of how I thought that this book would go, and so far I've been really surprised by basically everything about this book. For some reason, I assumed that it would be told in the third person. I don't know why, but that was just what I thought. But it's actually told in the first person, and it is also told through dual perspectives during 2 different timelines. So the first perspective that we get is of Patty, and it's when she is released out of jail and she is now living with Rose Gold and the new baby, and she can kind of tell that something is up with Rose Gold. She is not the sick little girl that she was when she first went to jail, and she can kind of tell that there's something a little sketchy going on. So the first character we follow is Patty during that timeline. The second character we follow is from the perspective of Rose Gold, but it's set a bit in the past, right when her mother first goes to jail, and we just kind of follow Rose Gold as she tries to get her life back on track after living this horrible way for the first 18 years of her life. So I wasn't expecting that right off the bat. Another thing I wasn't expecting is that I kind of knew that Patty would be an unlikable character, because like, how could she be a likable character with all the things that she did? But I really thought that I would... What is going on with my hair? This is just uncomfortable. Maybe I should just take my hair down. Well, that's probably not any better, but you know what? We're just going to do that. So, what was I saying? I knew... Sorry if the camera's shaking. I knew that Patty would be an unlikable character, but I really thought that I would sympathize with Rose Gold a bit more, and while, like, yes, obviously I feel bad for all of the things that happened to her, she is also a very unlikable character, which I just wasn't expecting, and I was like, is this me? Is this bad? Should I not be feeling this way? So I looked it up on Goodreads, and turns out a lot of people think that she is also a really unlikable character, which automatically makes the story a little bit odd for me, because I'm such a character-driven reader that now I'm just kind of like, I don't have any really care for these characters and what happens to them. I don't even feel like I have a character to really root for, because there's just like all kinds of twisted things happening in this story. However, the thing that does really make me want to keep reading it is, one, being familiar with the fact that this is probably clearly based on a true story, and I want to see how closely it will follow that story, but also because these characters are so well written. Like, they're not dislikable for no reason. Like, they are actually so well written, specifically Patty's character, because the way that she writes, the way that Patty thinks is like, she'll say the most twisted, messed up things, but it's like she says them so casually that makes it that much more creepy. And I'm sure that there's probably some questionable things that she said that I didn't even catch because they were just mentioned so, like, just in passing, like, just as a small thought, you barely would even catch it. But one specific thing that really caught my eye when I noticed that this was what was happening was when she notices that the neighbor's hand is, like, holding the doorway or something, and she's like, I wonder how hard you would have to slam a door to, like, sever the fingers off or something like that. But it was just like, it was as if she said it so casually, but it's such a disturbing thought to have. So these characters are so well written, but as a very character-driven reader, it just doesn't make it the most engaging story for me to read. So that is what I'm up to so far. I am definitely going to keep reading, and this is only about 300 pages, so it shouldn't take me that much longer to get through it. And then I have one more book that I will hopefully pick up this week. So yeah. So it is now day 5 of the Buzzword Readathon, and I am on page 220 of this book, so I'm 80 pages away from the end, and I'm still not really sure what I think about this book. One thing I have come to realize is that I think every single character in this book is actual garbage. They're written super well, but they're all just horrible, and they do such horrible things. I really think that, like, the moral question behind this book is the question of, like, if somebody does something horrible, does that make it okay to do something horrible to them? And that is also, like, the moral question of the real story, which is what I think this book is based off of. I know I said I was going to wait until I finished the book to give you a little rundown of the, like, actual story that I'm pretty sure it's based off of, because I wasn't sure if I was going to spoil it or not, but I really don't think this book so far has gone off of the real story enough that I don't think it's going to end the same way that the real one does. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the, like, real story and then explain to you how I think this book does compare similarly. So the real story is about Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard. So Gypsy Rose was the daughter, Dee Dee was the mother, and she had something called Munchausen by proxy, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing the beginning part of that word right, but I believe it's called Munchausen by proxy. It is a mental illness in which usually it's a caregiver, more specifically it's usually a parent and a child, even more specifically it's usually a mother and a daughter, but it's basically where a caregiver pretends that the person that they're caring for has these, like, medical problems or illnesses, or in some cases, like in this book or in the real story, they actually inflict a lot of these problems on the person that they're caring for. So this is what Dee Dee Blanchard did to her daughter, where she had all, oh my gosh, you can look it up, like, all of the things that she had her daughter go through. Gypsy Rose didn't even know how old she was. At one point, her father wasn't really in the picture, but he did try to, like, keep in contact with her, and at one point he called her on her 18th birthday, I believe, and before he was able to talk to Gypsy Rose, Dee Dee said, don't tell her that it's her 18th birthday because she doesn't know that she's 18, because she had Gypsy Rose thinking that she was, like, several years younger than what she actually was, and it was just, like, all kinds of horrible what this woman did to her daughter. So Gypsy Rose at one point went behind her mother's back, and she actually met a guy on the internet, and the guy that she met, he, I believe, was autistic, so he also had some mental illness problems in which Gypsy Rose thought that the only way that she could get away from her mother was if she was dead. So she asked her boyfriend that she met online if he could come there and kill her mother, and he did. He came to the house in the middle of the night and he brutally stabbed Dee Dee Blanchard several times until she died. And then they ended up getting caught, and both of them, Gypsy Rose and the boyfriend, are in jail, and I think they still are. So it kind of came down to this moral question of, like, you know, Gypsy Rose had already gone through all of this stuff for more than 20 years, I think. So is it fair for her to go to jail because she already went through all of this stuff? But also, even though Dee Dee was a horrible mother and a horrible person, and she basically had her daughter, like, tortured for no reason for years and years and years because of all the, like, medical procedures and surgeries and things that she did to her daughter, like, she was absolutely horrible. But was that enough for her to be brutally murdered the way that she was? So yeah, it just comes down to this, like, moral question of, if somebody does something horrible, is it okay to do something horrible to them. So the reason that I think this book is very closely inspired by the real story is because obviously we're dealing with the same kind of thing. I don't know if it actually specifically mentions in the book if what she has is the same mental illness. I assume that it is because I don't think that there's many different variations of that, but I don't know if it ever specifically mentions it by name. The other reason I think it is closely inspired by the real story is because there's specific details about like Rose Gold in this book, besides the fact that they have very similar names, like Gypsy Rose and Rose Gold. It's very similar. But also, in this book, it's mentioned several times that as a child, she was really only able to watch Disney movies, and even as she grows up in the book, you see her watching a lot of Disney movies and mentioning that The Little Mermaid was her favorite, and Disney movies was just a very specific thing mentioned in the book as something that Rose Gold really likes. And in real life, Gypsy Rose was only really allowed to watch Disney movies, and she absolutely loved them, and she wanted to, like, have that happily ever after. And so that's very similar. Also in this book, it is mentioned that Patty, the mother, was a, like, nurse's aide or a nurse practitioner or something like that, and in real life, Dee Dee Blanchard was a nurse something or another, and that is how, like, both of them were able to get away with what they did because they were able to keep up with, like, the medical jargon when dealing with doctors and stuff like that. So those were just two very specific things about the real people that are the same with the characters in this book. Obviously the story is already different because in this book the mother does go to jail, and, you know, Rose Gold, she ends up, like, having a baby and she owns a house and stuff like that, whereas in the real story Gypsy Rose is still behind bars, which again, as to whether she should be or shouldn't be, is still kind of up for debate. So that was a very long story, but I just wanted to tell you because I just felt like I needed to share it to give you a little bit of context for this book. But yeah, everybody in this book is horrible because you just have, there's, like, now become this kind of domino effect of people being horrible and then being horrible to other people, and then it just keeps going and going and going. So anyways, I'm really hoping that I'll be able to finish this by the end of tonight, and then I can start on my third book of the week. So it is now the end of day 6, and last night I did finish Darling Rose Gold. I actually ended up looking up an author interview just because I've been referencing this Gypsy Rose story as the inspiration for this book so many times, and I wanted to know if it was actually true or not. And when I looked up the author interview, the interviewer did bring up the story of Gypsy Rose, but the author actually credited a lot of the inspiration for the story to another instance of this happening, and not the Gypsy Rose Dee Dee Blanchard case. I still think there are way too many similarities with just actual, like, character kind of traits for it not to have been at least a little bit inspired by the Gypsy Rose case. But I keep saying that I think it's inspired by it, but technically, as far as what I can tell with author interviews, she doesn't seem to say that that is the prominent case that inspired this book, which, like, fair enough. I'm sure some of the character similarities could just be a coincidence. Although I still think the fact that her name was Gypsy Rose and this character is called Rose Gold is the biggest coincidence of them all. As far as my overall thoughts on this book, unfortunately I landed at about a 3.5 star rating. I really thought it would be a 4-star book just because of how good the writing was, but unfortunately the ending fell a bit flat for me. About halfway through the book I predicted a twist that I thought was going to happen, and it did end up happening. And honestly, for me, I would much prefer a predictable ending than an unrealistic ending, whereas with this book, it was both of those things. I both predicted the ending, but I also just don't believe that the character would have been able to pull off what she did. So yeah, that was a little bit of a bummer because, like I said, it was one thing for me to predict what happens. I don't think predicting the ending, for me at least, automatically makes it like a bad ending or something like that, but having it be predictable and also not believable is a little bit of an issue. So I did end up giving it around 3.5 stars because I do still think that like the way that the characters are written are super good. It was more so maybe the plot towards the end that went a little askew. So that is my second book done for the week, and then this morning I started on my final book, which is The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. I am only 28 pages into this book, so I didn't get very far. I just started it this morning, and then we had some family come and visit, so I've been spending basically the whole afternoon with them, and now I just got home and it's 7 o'clock at night. So I'm still hoping to get quite a bit of reading done tonight. It is like a 360-page book, so I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this before the end of tomorrow. But to give you a little bit of an idea of what this book is about, it takes place in a small town in upstate New York, and we seem to be following 3 main characters. So far I've only been introduced to 2 of them. The first one that we're following is Justin Hawthorne, and they're basically in this town. It's like there were prominent families that seem to have like magical abilities that are passed down through like the bloodlines, and Justin is a part of the family that is supposed to kind of protect this town from something called the Gray, which devours people, and we haven't gotten far enough in the story for it to really describe exactly what that is, but his family seems to protect it. And then Violet Saunders is the other main character that we follow, and she is just returning back to the town with her mother, and she's never been to this town before, so she doesn't seem to know that she comes from like a family that has special abilities. But I think when she ends up meeting Justin and maybe this third character that, like I said, I haven't been introduced yet, I think they're going to start to figure some stuff out, and they're going to have to like protect the town from this devouring gray that keeps killing people, basically. So far I'm only 30 pages in. I'm enjoying the story so far. I like things set in small towns. I like that it's specifically set in upstate New York. I think that's a pretty cool setting. So yeah, I'll have to get back to you on this tomorrow as far as like any real solid thoughts, but as of right now, I am enjoying it. So it is now at the final day of the readathon. It's 4 o'clock in the evening, so we've got very few hours left to get any reading in. I am on page 140 of this book. I didn't do a lot of reading last night. I actually did most of my reading today, this morning, more specifically. So I'm not thinking that I'm gonna finish this book by the end of the day, but I am gonna try to get as far as possible into it. I'm like a little bit less than halfway through it, so we'll see how much I can get through tonight. I am having a little bit of a sad day. I don't know if I should be bothering sharing this or not, but I know that people used to comment and say that they really liked my reading vlogs because I was very honest and open in them, so I suppose I'll share with you why I'm feeling sad today. I've been trying to move out of the place that I'm living in for basically my whole life, but more specifically for at least the last 2 years that I've been seriously trying to move out and get my own place, and I'd been looking for places to rent, but it just wasn't working out. So then I was kind of looking into maybe like buying a house, even though I know I'm pretty young and the chances of a bank like giving me a loan would be slim, but in my little haven't lived very long brain, it just made more sense for me to like invest in something like a house that I would like to live in for a long time than rent an apartment that I'm eventually going to move out of. So I was looking at houses last night, and I found a house in the area that was like a dream house. Like, I can't explain to you all of the features on this house that are like all of the ways that I would describe a dream house, but it's just like a little too out of my price range, which makes me very sad because I would buy that house instantly if it was just a little bit cheaper than what it was, and also if a bank was willing to give me a loan. But yeah, so I'm feeling a bit sad today because I really thought my chances of getting out of here were looking up, and then it didn't, but that's okay. It is the day of the Super Bowl. We're thinking about maybe ordering Chinese food because that's usually what we would do every year on the Super Bowl, but I don't know how well that's going to work out this year due to the whole COVID situation, so we'll just have to see what happens. I am, however, very much looking forward to the Super Bowl commercials because this is also just information I don't really need to be telling you, but if you know me at all, I am obsessed with Timothée Chalamet, and if you didn't know, he's doing a commercial for, I don't even know what the car is, because I don't care about that part, but he's playing Edgar Scissorhands, which is the son of Edward Scissorhands, and he's born with scissors for hands, and he can't, like, really operate in life, and he can't really drive a car, so the whole point of the commercial is that there's, like, this car that's like a no hands driving thing. I don't really know, but the commercial already like came out and it's on YouTube, but I'm gonna see if I can actually catch it when they play it during the Super Bowl. So yeah, that's exciting. I'm not sure anybody cared to hear the whole thing that I just said, so we're just gonna move on and get back to reading before we run out of time. So it is now the next day, which means the readathon is officially over. I wanted to update you last night, but I ended up falling asleep before I was able to, but I thought I would just give you a little final wrap up of how the week went. So I only ended up reading up to page 218 in this book, which is a little more than halfway through it, so I'm still pleased with finishing about 2.5 books during the week. And as far as like a little bit of my thoughts on this book before we end this, it's just kind of a middle of the road book for me. It's one of those books where everything about it is fine, but like not great. So the best way that I can describe it is that I liked it enough to not DNF it, but I don't know if I like it enough to pick up the sequel, because this is the first part of a duology. So it's really all just going to come down to how this book ends, which isn't to say that this isn't going to end as a solid 4-star read, because there have been plenty of books that I've read where I've felt the exact same way about this book, and then the last like 50 pages just blow my mind. So this book could still have a lot of potential, who's to say. But then the other books I did get around to reading was the Across the Green Grass Fields, and then also Darling Rose Gold. So I did end up finishing 2.5 books this week, 3 different colors in the title, green, rose gold, and gray. So I'm pretty happy with how this went, and I'm hoping to participate in the Buzzword Readathon in some of the upcoming months as well, and hopefully I will vlog it if you guys liked this one. So yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!